In the year 258 AD, something terrifying happened in the heart of the Roman Empire. A young man was tied down to a big hot metal griddle. Underneath him, fire burned strong. The heat was so intense, it burned his skin and cooked his flesh slowly. People came to watch. It was supposed to be a warning to others. But what they saw shocked them all. The man didn't scream. He didn't cry. Instead, he smiled. And then, in a voice calm and clear, he said something no one could believe. "Turn me over. I'm done on this side." This was not a joke. It was not a sign of madness. This was St. Lawrence, a Christian leader facing one of the worst deaths the Romans could think of, and he mocked them as he burned. St. Lawrence wasn't just any man. He was a Christian deacon, someone who helped lead the church. His death wasn't just cruel. It was meant to send a message. The Romans didn't just want to kill him. They wanted to break his spirit, and the spirit of all Christians watching. They thought this slow, painful burning would make people too scared to believe anymore. But they were wrong. Instead of fear, the crowd saw something different, something they couldn't explain. This man, burning alive, was calm, even joking. It made some wonder. Was there something stronger than pain guiding him? This wasn't some random attack. Roman leaders had a plan. They wanted to crush the Christian faith. They wanted to take away the church's money, leaders, and hope. They chose fire not just to hurt, but to humiliate. They thought that this would prove Christians were weak. But St. Lawrence's death would do the opposite. It would change everything. Before Emperor Valerian, Roman rulers were inconsistent in how they punished Christians. Some ignored them, others attacked them here and there, but Valerian changed everything. In the years 257 and 258 AD, he passed new laws that were cold, cruel, and very clear. He didn't want to scare just a few Christians. He wanted to destroy the entire religion. Valerian's plan was simple. Don't waste time on the poor. Cut off the head. So he went after the leaders, the bishops, priests, and deacons. He ordered them to bow to Roman gods or be killed on the spot. If they refused, they would lose everything, their lives, their money, even their graves. Christian cemeteries were locked. Church meetings were banned. Wealthy Christian families had their homes and gold taken. The city of Rome became a ticking time bomb. About 1 in 10 people in Rome were now Christian, and they were becoming stronger, more organized, and harder to ignore. They cared for the sick, fed the poor, and even buried strangers no one else would touch. But the one thing they refused to do? Worship the emperor. To the Romans, that wasn't just rude. It was treason. The church wasn't just a group of believers anymore. Under Pope Sixtus II, it had become a powerful machine, with money, leaders, and connections all across the empire. And guess who kept track of all that? Lawrence. He was the chief deacon of Rome, like the treasurer of the church. He knew where the money was, who needed help, and how to keep everything running, even in secret. To the Roman Empire, that made him very dangerous and very valuable. Lawrence didn't start out in Rome. He was born around 225 AD in what is now Spain. Even as a boy, he was smart, not for seeing visions or performing miracles, but because he was good at organizing people. He helped the local church run smoothly. He managed food, money, and supplies. When Pope Sixtus visited Spain, he saw something special in Lawrence. He invited him to Rome, not knowing that one day Lawrence would become a legend. When Lawrence accepted the invitation to Rome, it was a huge opportunity, but also a huge risk. At first, Rome seemed like a place where Christians could live in peace. They had jobs. They raised families. Some even worked for the government. But it was all a mask. One rumor, one law change, one bad moment, and a peaceful Christian could suddenly become a criminal. For someone like Lawrence, young, smart, and from out of town, just surviving in Rome took serious skill. Lawrence didn't just survive, he rose fast. He became the chief deacon, one of the top leaders in the church. That meant he was in charge of the church's money, its help for the poor, and even the secret lists of who the Christians were and where they lived. This wasn't just bookkeeping. Lawrence was running what we'd now call a social support system. The church gave food to thousands of poor people every day. They helped widows, orphans, even ransomed prisoners. They buried the dead when no one else would. The church wasn't just kind. It was becoming powerful. To the Roman rulers, this made Christianity dangerous. And Lawrence, he became one of the most watched men in the empire. He could speak Latin and Greek. He knew how Rome worked. He could talk to rich pagans one minute and feed the hungry the next. He was a bridge between two worlds that were about to crash into each other. And when he finally fell, it would shock the entire city. On August 6th, 2058, everything changed. Roman soldiers stormed into an underground cemetery, catching Pope Sixtus II and other deacons during a secret Christian service. They were arrested and killed on the spot. It wasn't just an attack, it was a message. We're watching. We will destroy this church from the top down. Lawrence wasn't there that night, but now he was the last leader left. Christians turned to him for help. Rome turned to him for answers. Soon after, the Roman prefect called Lawrence in. This wasn't just an arrest, it was a deal. Give us the church's treasure, and we might let you live. The Romans wanted gold, silver, precious stones, anything they could take. But Lawrence had something else in mind. He looked the prefect in the eyes and asked, "Give me 3 days, and I will bring you what the church values most." The prefect nodded. He thought he had won, but he had no idea what Lawrence was really planning. In those 3 days, Lawrence worked without rest. He took the church's treasure, every coin, every item of value, and he gave it all away. To the poor, to the hungry, to widows, orphans, and families who had nothing. He sold what he could to help Christian families survive. He moved people into hiding. He risked everything to protect them. He knew the truth. If he gave the Romans what they wanted, he'd save himself, but lose his soul. If he refused, he'd be killed in the worst way possible. And still, he chose to stand for his faith. Some say he even found humor in his final days, as if he knew that his death would speak louder than any treasure ever could. On August 10th, 2058, Lawrence returned. But he didn't bring treasure. Instead, he brought people. Hundreds of Rome's poorest citizens stood beside him, the blind, the sick, the crippled, widows, orphans. All of them had been helped by the Christian church. Lawrence looked at the prefect and said, "These are the treasures of the church." The prefect was furious. He expected gold. He got beggars. This wasn't just refusal. It was mockery in public. Lawrence had turned the empire's rules upside down. In Rome, money meant power. But Lawrence said the poor were worth more than gold. It was a message the prefect could not ignore. And now, he wanted revenge. The Romans didn't just want Lawrence dead. They wanted him to suffer. They wanted his death to be a warning to all Christians. So they chose one of the most terrifying ways to die. They would roast him alive. They chose the griddle, a large iron rack shaped like a giant cooking tray. It was built to spread heat evenly so the body would burn slowly, not quickly. This wasn't random torture. It was designed like a machine. Hot enough to hurt, but not hot enough to kill right away. Roman executioners were experts in pain. They knew exactly how to keep a person alive and in agony for hours. They set the griddle at just the right height. They tested the heat again and again. Everything was perfectly arranged to turn a human body into a slow-burning spectacle. Word spread fast. People came from all over the city to watch. Roman citizens, curious travelers, soldiers, even Christians, some crying, some praying, some frozen with fear. The air was heavy. People expected screams, blood, and begging. They were about to see something else entirely. Lawrence didn't look scared. He didn't fight. He didn't cry. He walked like he had an appointment, not a death sentence. Even the executioners were confused. Usually prisoners broke down before the fire even started. But Lawrence, he was calm, almost peaceful. The fire roared. The iron bars glowed red. The heat was intense, far hotter than what human skin can take. The iron touched his back, and his skin began to sizzle and burn. Sharp, square patterns were scorched into his body. The smell of burning flesh filled the air. Even the soldiers, men who had seen death before, looked away. But then, something terrifying happened. Lawrence didn't scream. He didn't beg. He spoke, not in pain, but in conversation. He began talking to the soldiers and the crowd, clear, calm, and somehow still himself. The man who should have been broken was unshaken. Then came the moment that made history. Lawrence looked up and said, "Turn me over. I'm done on this side." A joke, a mockery, as if he were a piece of meat, giving cooking instructions. The Romans had never seen anything like this. A man burning alive, smiling, speaking, refusing to give them fear. This wasn't just pain, it was power. Lawrence didn't just say, "Turn me over, I'm done." He added something even more shocking. "Turn me over and eat." It sounds like madness, but it wasn't. It was a joke, a dark, clever pun. He was comparing himself to meat being cooked at a feast. But it wasn't just humor. It was a challenge. He was telling the Romans, "You haven't broken me. I'm still in control." The soldiers were stunned. They were trained to spot fear. They were used to screams, begging, and people falling apart. But Lawrence? He was telling them how to cook him, giving instructions, mocking them. This wasn't a man losing his mind. This was a man who refused to give them what they wanted. Fear. The people watching had come for a show. A brutal, bloody display of Roman power crushing a weak Christian. But this was something else. They started whispering, "Is this magic? Is their God protecting him? How can he still be talking?" The Romans did turn him over, but it felt like they were following his orders. Every move they made, every time they adjusted the fire, it all seemed to happen the way Lawrence wanted. The man burning alive had somehow become the leader of his own death. Christian writers later said Lawrence kept talking, praying for Rome, thanking God for his suffering, and even asking for the people who were killing him to be forgiven. Whether those quotes are exact or not, one thing is clear. Lawrence wasn't trying to escape. He was using his pain to send a message. What started as a public punishment turned into a public awakening. The crowd had come to see power win over weakness, but they left asking, what if real strength is something else? They had watched a man burn alive, and yet somehow he won. The people who came to watch Lawrence die weren't Christians. They were regular Roman citizens. They believed in the empire. They believed in power, in control, in punishment. To them, executions were normal, even entertaining. They knew the script. The prisoner acts tough. The pain gets worse. The prisoner breaks down, begs, cries, screams. That's how it always went. But not this time. Lawrence didn't scream. He didn't beg. He kept talking. And with every moment he didn't break, the crowd grew more uncomfortable. People whispered, "Is he using magic? What kind of man doesn't fear fire? What if his God is real?" Some started to wonder if the Romans were the bad guys in this story. The crowd started to shift. People stopped cheering. They stopped laughing. They looked at each other, not sure what they believed anymore. Even the Roman officials noticed. They had seen this before. When crowds turned, when fear became doubt, and doubt became rage. A public execution was supposed to show Roman power. But this one was showing something else, Roman weakness. Then, after hours of torture, Lawrence did something no one expected. He looked up, not at his torturers, but at the Roman governor watching from above, and he said, "Thank you for giving me this chance to show my faith. May God bring light to the Roman Empire." It was the final blow, not with a sword, not with fire, but with faith. Even the toughest soldiers stood in shock. Lawrence had burned for hours, and his last words weren't anger. They were forgiveness. When Lawrence finally died, it wasn't the Romans who had won. It was the man on the fire. To the very end, Lawrence didn't curse the people who tortured him. He didn't cry out for help. He turned his death into something bigger, an act of worship. Even in his last breath, he won. The crowd had come to watch the empire show its power. But what they saw was a single man stronger than fear, fire, and death. The Roman officials panicked. They ordered the crowd to leave immediately. They tried to control the story. But it was too late. Stories of what happened spread like fire through the city. They changed as they were told. But everyone agreed on one thing. A Christian deacon was burned alive, and somehow he turned it into a victory. The Christian community didn't hide. They didn't fall apart. They rose. Lawrence's death became a spark, a symbol of courage that no torture could crush. What was meant to scare them into silence had done the opposite. Now they were more bold than ever. The empire had made a mistake. They thought killing Lawrence would destroy Christian hope. Instead, they had created a martyr, a hero more powerful in death than in life. Lawrence became a legend. Rome's fire couldn't burn away his faith. And in the ashes of torture, something unbreakable remained. After Lawrence's death, something strange happened. Even Romans, the very people who had supported the empire, began asking questions. What kind of faith makes a man brave enough to burn and still smile? The execution was supposed to stop Christianity. Instead, it made it stronger. Lawrence's death became a turning point. Christians didn't hide in fear. They came together. They believed even more. The emperor tried to stop it. He made the punishments harsher, the laws stricter, the prisons fuller. But the more he tried to crush the faith, the stronger it grew. For Christians, Lawrence became a hero, not just because he was brave, but because he showed them that suffering could have meaning. His pain wasn't wasted. It became a message. In time, even the Roman Empire changed. Lawrence's example helped Christians understand that real power wasn't about armies or gold. It was about spirit, faith, and truth. Years later, in 313 A.D., the Emperor Constantine made Christianity legal across the empire. Well, Lawrence's story didn't end in flames. It became a lesson for the world. He showed that a single person, armed with faith and courage, can stand against the most powerful empire on earth and still win. We still live in a world full of pain, power, and injustice. But Lawrence's story asks us one simple question. What would you be willing to stand for, even if it cost you everything? St. Lawrence was burned alive, but the fire never touched his spirit. Now here's a question for you. If you were in his place, what would you have done? Let me know in the comments below. If you want more dark and powerful stories from history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that bell. And if you think this story was intense, wait until you hear about the man who was boiled alive while still preaching,